RGB mice are pretty great, aren't they? They have a lot of customizable buttons, they look really cool. I mean, I myself use them on a daily basis, even though I'm not a gamer. But there's just one problem. You see, these kind of mice don't really work with restricted environments like, for example, your office laptop. Because of all these fancy lights and stuff, these mice have a slightly different way of communicating with the system. So it's possible that your laptop or your computer may see this as something else than just a pointing device. What? You cannot be serious. I'm serious, this thing wasn't working before and now it seems to suddenly decided to work just fine. Oh. So that's where these things come in, office mice or non-RGB mice as they're called. Now there are a bunch of different options in different price tags. I have a few of them here. So I thought if you are shopping for an office mouse, what are the things that you should be considering, or what price tag would be ideal so that you will get the most value without spending too much. Now these mice are slightly different in terms of their price tags, but I'm gonna tell you right off the bat, without any suspense, don't go for the cheapest ones that you find out there. Anything under 250 rupees or 200 rupees, that's gonna be absolute trash, like this one for example. I bought this thinking that maybe it'll work fine because compared to other options, it's only 50 rupees less. So I thought there may not be much of a difference, but sadly I was wrong. This one in particular from a brand called Adcom turned out to be absolute garbage. Well, first of all, it doesn't track well on smooth surfaces, like a surface like this, for example, which has slightly a reflective tendency. The mouse doesn't work on this at all. You need to have some kind of a mouse mat like this in order for this to work. And secondly, the mouse is not balanced. You can kind of hear it wobbling around. So the shoes underneath this mouse, they're not of the same height. So even that's made pretty poorly for the price. This thing was, I think, going for somewhere under 200 rupees, and yeah, it works as a mouse, but it only lasted me for 2 months, and as expected, after 2 months it completely or partially stopped working. So you would be better off not buying the cheapest end. Even if you're just looking for an entry-level mouse that you'll only use for a couple of months, don't go for the cheapest ones, because this thing, other than its horrible stability and functionality dependencies, it kind of hurt my wrist because the size is a little bit big, and even though I have kind of bigger hands, yeah, this didn't feel really comfortable and my wrist was paining after a while. So avoid the cheapest end of the spectrum and please go for slightly expensive mice. And when I say expensive, it could be 50 or 100 rupees more. And that's exactly where these options come in. Cheap options from known brands like Dell and Lenovo. These brands you have heard before, and they make exceptional quality stuff at higher prices, but they are also making stuff at lower costs. Now these mice on the other hand will last you a very long time, and they will be of a respectable quality without spending too much more than these cheap entry-level garbage. Like this one for example that I got recently. This was a bestseller on Amazon for office mice. So it's a Lenovo mouse which is only 50 rupees more than this, and the quality improvement is drastic. Well, first of all, this can track on any surface, like this smooth surface here, so I can directly use it on a table without having to put a mouse mat on anything like that. So the sensor quality here is high enough that it can track from a smooth surface as well, whereas this thing just fails. Now these things, even after being used for years together, like this one for example is kind of 2-year-old, but you can see that even after being used every day for 2 years, it largely remains usable. Like I know the clicks have gotten a little bit softer and the scroll wheel is moving around a little bit, but that's not bad for the price I paid for this. I mean 2 years versus 2 months and the price is almost same. So yeah, don't go for the cheap stuff. Now one thing to watch out for when you're shopping for office mice is that usually these mice will have a good quality clicking buttons, but some of them will have a terrible quality scroll wheel, because a scroll wheel requires a little bit more mechanical precision as compared to a left and right click. So for example, this mouse has a pretty awful scroll wheel. It's very uneven. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't scroll properly. This one is quite decent, and in contrast, but it's not really on par with something like this, for example. See, this mechanical scroll wheel is it's step based, so this is kind of a smooth scroll wheel. This works either smoothly or step by step. But still, Lenovo has done a decent job here. The rubberized scroll wheel doesn't move around too much and it scrolls just fine. And even though these office mice don't usually come with a DPI control, unlike the gaming mice where you can change the DPI speed, basically how fast the cursor moves on the screen, These mice come with a fixed DPI and it's usually written somewhere down here. Now this one from Lenovo, I found that it tracks pretty well. I think the DPI is somewhere around 1800, so that's pretty fast. Some of you might find it to be too fast, but I'm okay with it. It scrolls across the screen with just a minor movement. Now these two options that you see here are under 400 rupees. So this is 299 and this is, I believe, similar price tag, maybe around 299 again. But this thing is pretty much significantly a little bit more expensive than this. At least at the time of purchasing, this was around 599. So this is on par with this, and I have to say, of the bunch, the scroll wheel on here is much more precise and much higher quality. And this is a 9-year-old mouse. Yeah, 9-year-old. It doesn't work anymore because I managed to break the cable, and that was actually my fault. But structurally, the mouse is fine. The left and right clicks are still very pronounced, and the scroll wheel doesn't wobble like this one does. So I guess Logitech is a better brand when it comes to budget mice. But then again, this is kind of twice as expensive as any of these. So if you have the budget to spend for it, then definitely go for something like this, because even though there are newer models out there in these, the higher end version, even if it's an older version, it will work better than those. Now the last thing I want to touch upon is the ergonomics, because you will be using these mice for several hours a day. Comfort is very important. Now one thing to note is most of these mice are pretty small, like you can easily cover them with your hand. I thought the small mice will be more painful to use because your fingers might hurt after a while. So I bought this giant one, but turns out these king size mice, as this is called, actually these kind of bigger mice are more difficult to use for a long time as compared to smaller ones. So speaking from experience, I have used this for 7-8 hours a day, and even as compared to something as ergonomic as these, the smaller ones are a much better experience, and your hand barely feels any kind of tiredness even after 5-6 hours of usage. So keep that in mind. If a mouse sounds too small for your hands, then that's a good thing. If it's too big, then that's a problem. Now this one, for example, the mouse that I use, it has plenty of cushioning around it, and it fits just right in my hands. And I don't use this for 6-7 hours a day, so it's fine for me. I need the extra buttons anyway. But my work mouse, I'm using this currently, and this feels great. You can see the shape is really nice, and it's a little bit smaller, which I thought would be a problem because my fingers are extending above it. But that's actually a good thing because your fingers need less strength to press the left and right click now. Bigger mice are bad news. Smaller mice with slightly better quality plastic, they are the way to go. So yeah, that's something that I wanted to point about these office mice and how you should purchase something, not this. Okay, there you have it. That was something on office mice in case you are looking for it. Logitech definitely makes really great mice and keyboards, but they are also kind of expensive nowadays. So if you want something on the cheaper side, then go with something else like Dell or Lenovo, which are computer makers, and they do make peripheral accessories like this. In case you're wondering, I'll leave all the links to the keyboard and mice that I'm using on a daily basis. You can use that as a reference. So if you have any other questions, then leave them in the comments down below, and I think I'll see you next time. Cheers.